Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session of the Campus Compact National Webinar Series. I'm J.R. Jameson, the Executive Director of Indiana Campus Compact, and I'm the host of today's session. Before we begin, as a step toward honoring the truth and achieving healing and reconciliation, Campus Compact seeks to acknowledge the traditional native lands on which we stand. Given that we are gathering for today's webinar from across the country and some from around the world, we invite you to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Native people where you are joining us from in the chat. I am participating from Muncie, Indiana, which is located on the traditional homelands of the Lenape people of the Miami Nation. Many other tribes, such as the Kickapoo, Shawnee, and the Pokogan Band of the Potawatomi, also call this area home. The region has long been a center for indigenous people to gather, trade, and maintain kinship ties. Today, the Miami Nation of Indiana still resides in this area, although unfortunately, despite multiple efforts throughout many years and generations, the US Congress does not recognize the nation as separate from the Miami tribe of Oklahoma. However, members of the tribe continue to live here, contribute to the life of Indiana, and celebrate their heritage and traditions right here where I sit, in the Miami Nation of Indiana. We also want to recognize and stand in solidarity with those individuals who are continuing to call for racial justice and equitable communities, and affirm that Black lives matter. We commit to move beyond words into programs and actions that fully embody a commitment to full participation and equity. Today's webinar, Honoring Ways of Knowing for Biocultural Restoration and Resilience in the Face of Climate Change, is brought to you by Atina Pasqua, Dr. Robert Franco, Denise Pearson, Dr. Ula Hasiger, and David Chang. Atina Pasqua is the Director of the Office of Civic and Community Engagement at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and she is the Executive Director of Hawaii Pacific Islands Campus Compact. Dr. Franco is the Director of the Office for Institutional Effectiveness at Kapiolani Community College, and he is an ecological and demographic anthropologist whose research focuses on contemporary Hawaiian, Samoan, and Pacific Islander sociocultural issues. Denise Pearson is the Service Learning Coordinator in the Office for Institutional Effectiveness at Kapiolani Community College. She has worked in the service learning field since 1994, and her passion includes helping students become successful in pursuing their educational goals through civic and community engagement. Dr. Hasiger is the Director of Civic Engagement for the College of Social Sciences at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She is a Danish anthropologist specialized in environmental and global anthropology, sustainability, oceania, ethnicity, indigeneity, civic and community engagement, social justice, and transdisciplinary research and education. David Chang is a native Hawaiian musician, a 2013 student participant in the MENA Service Learning Program through Kapiolani Community College, a student leader of the MENA program and international short-term programs from 2013 to present, and is a Hawaiian Studies and Anthropology student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Before I hand the session over to our presenters, I want to invite the audience to submit questions throughout the session using the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screens. Please do not use the regular chat box for questions, as the chat box will not be monitored by the presenters or me during the session. So please use the official Q&A chat box, and the questions will be addressed throughout the session and some at the end. On behalf of Campus Compact, thank you again for registering for today's session. And I'll now turn it over to David Chang, who will lead us through a Hawaiian opening protocol prior to the start of the presentation.
E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna no e au o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna no e au o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna no ehu o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai Aloha nui kako. This chant, e ho mai, is used to help ground us, open our minds, connect us, open our minds, connect us to our past, present, and future, and to guide us in our teaching and learning from each other. So with those thoughts present in our minds and hearts, I would like to offer this land acknowledgement to acknowledge Kapai Aina o Hawai'i as an indigenous space and to acknowledge its people known as Kanaka Maoli. From Na Ili Aina of Kaimuki and Manoa in the Ahupua'a of Waikiki, in the Moku of Kona, and on the Mokupuni of Oahu, we welcome you.
Sorry, thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you, David, for your land acknowledgement and the beautiful chant to welcome us today. I'm sure that most of you have read the description for today's session, but just to go through quickly, we have had our protocol and we will be discussing how our projects at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and Kapi'olani Community College have been amplifying our community voices, and also how some opportunities we have looked into and have transcended the barriers to success with our communities together. And we also are very proud to be able to share with you the projects that have been done in partnership between the two institutions to meet the needs of the Waikiki, Palolo, and the surrounding areas of our institutions. At the end of our session, we will have some time for reflection and for questions. So we will begin with Bob taking it away.
Okay, authentic civic engagement. If you read the abstract, we believe the foundation for mutually beneficial partnerships is that we amplify different ways of knowing and respect those different ways of knowing. And then we're going to go through 4 case studies where we have tried to do that and have tried to sustain that effort at respectful interaction with our partners and really recognizing that they're more expert than we are. The first case study will be Palolo. If you can move the next slide. Palolo Partnership, it began in 1995, and Palolo Homes is a public housing community comprised of 306 units with a high percentage of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander families. We began there in 1995 with the encouragement of then Kapi'olani Provost John Morton. We've benefited from the ways of knowing of Dahlia Asuenga, Director of Resident Services at Palolo Homes all these years. In the late 1990s, we received a small 3-year grant from MCI WorldCom through Campus Compact to bridge the digital divide in Palolo housing. After the second successful year of that grant, the funding from MCI abruptly ended, and Dahlia wondered if the 2 campuses would leave. She encouraged us to stay, and we did. In the early 2000s, there was an annual Palolo Pride Festival. I still have all those t-shirts that provided a space for faculty from KCC and UH Manoa to get to know Palolo families and the Palolo vibe. Chaminade University joined the effort and makes strong contributions to this day. About that time, Mutual Housing of Hawaii Incorporated, led by David Nakamura, a brilliant UC Berkeley educated accountant, purchased all 306 units at Palolo Homes. With Dahlia's leadership and that of her advisory board, all 306 units were renovated in 1 year, and the families were back in new units. David began to write grant proposals to the legislature, and we wrote letters of support, hitting often very tight deadlines. David reciprocated by writing a support letter, along with Atina, to support a Kapi'olani proposal to housing and urban development. With an $800,000 HUD grant and another $900,000 raised by David, we completed a 1.7 million, 5,200 square feet renovation called the Palolo Ohana Learning Center in 2008. In this process, Dahlia hired two AmeriCorps Vistas, Yvonne and Kauhane, who continue at Palolo Homes as full-time staff today. About this time, Dahlia keynoted at the Continuums of Service Conference in Portland. Ula, Denise, Chaminades, Candace Sakuda, and I meet with Dahlia and her staff monthly as the Learning Center Advisory Board. We have come to realize that Dahlia, David, Yvonne, and Kauhane are keepers and sharers of essential knowledge that we just don't have. Currently, all programming at the Learning Center is governed by 10 years of memoranda of agreement with KCC and UH Manoa. Mutual Housing and Palolo Homes define and track these MOAs. Some of the programs are on this slide that we've had over the 25-year history. Bridging the Digital Divide. We have a Palolo Ohana program that Ula ran with families every Thursday night for an entire semester or two. We've done a lot of environmental and stream restoration work. We got some funds from NSF to develop a science center on the housing property. Ula and her students led an Exploring My Backyard and Beyond summer program. And in the end, we're really trying to get these students from Palolo Housing to our colleges. Next slide. Just a few slides. The first slide shows a group of Japanese students at the Palolo Ohana Learning Center. Ula and others arranged these international student visits to the Learning Center. And Dahlia is very focused on her housing kids having these kinds of international and intercultural experiences. Next. These are some really special projects. Ula and her students built a Polynesian canoe, and the Palolo students were able to practice and navigate and learn a lot about Pacific history and culture, as well as overcoming ethnic differences that are still an issue in Hawaii. And then on the bottom right, you can see the food security program and the summer work that the Palolo kids are involved in. This is actually a garden right in the housing property. Next. And this is a really cool picture. This is a crawfish, an invasive species that one of the Palolo kids discovered at one of the ahupua on Oahu, and part of the curriculum is focused on what we can do about invasive species in the islands. I'd like to turn it over to Ula now for her and her remarkable work. Muted.
I did not know that. Sorry about that little kink. I'll get back to it. Okay. All right. So, as Bob explained, we have been working a long time in Palolo, but we have also been working a long time in the Malama Ina Hupua program, and I have to go back one slide if I can. Oh. Sorry. It went well until now.
Try the arrow, try the left arrow.
Yeah, it didn't, okay. Didn't work earlier. Okay, I am sorry. The next thing that's gonna happen is my dog starts barking, but this is life. Okay, so since 1997, we've been running a program called Malama Ina Hupua, and that was actually created in collaboration between Kapi'olani Community College and UH Manoa. And it's been a very strong component in our 2+4 pathway from community college to the Research One institution that Manoa is. The process of running this program has been a learning experience all the way through. So we started out being very concerned about the responsibility of humans to take care of the places that they were living. And when we first created this program, we really wanted students to understand where they were living and take on the responsibility to take care of it. So thinking about the Adopt a Highway program that you probably all know, we called this Adopt an Ahupua. An Ahupua is a land division going from the top of the mountain out in the sea. It was traditionally a kind of a self-sustaining unit in Hawaiian culture, and it's still a very important way of understanding the world, a general orientation. So the stories behind it, the way of understanding things, is that humans are part of the environment. The Hawaiian origin stories tells us how the land was created by a union of the sky father and the earth mother, and the lands and the humans were created together. There is in Hawaiian culture a very strong feeling that it's a responsibility of the elders, the elder siblings towards the younger siblings, to take care of the siblings. And the way that you talk about this responsibility to feed people is called hanai, and that's the same word that we use for adopt. To make a short story, or a long story short, we realized that we actually had this whole thing backwards. It is the responsibility of the younger siblings, the humans, to malama, to take care of the land. In return, the land will feed us. So with the help from some friends we had at Ni'ihau, an island where they still speak Hawaiian on a daily basis, we made sure that when we changed the program name, it actually changed to be correct. So now we call it Malama Ina Ahupua, or Mina for short. That means to take care of the Ahupua, the land divisions. Along with this realization came a development in Hawaiian indigenous building of theory, that we no longer talk so much about place-based learning in Hawaii, we talk about aina-based learning. Aina is the term for land. It also means that which feeds. But it encompasses land, environment, and it encompasses culture. So this really means, yes, we are place-based, but it's not just the place, it's also the people and the culture. When I introduce this program to students, I always say that the leaders of the program, that would often be me and David Chang, we are not teaching you. We're just giving you the opportunity to get out and learn from the land itself and from the caretakers of the land. Students kind of look at me funny when I say that, particularly the part about the land, but usually they get it by the end of the program. We can see that in their reflection papers. Mina happens to be a great abbreviation because it also in itself means to prize greatly, value greatly, especially of something in danger of being lost. And that's exactly what has happened in Hawaii, where we have seen over the years that the land has been destroyed by greed and just not knowing what people were destroying. So the Cultural Environmental Service Learning Program encompasses a lot of different issues and topics, and also have many ways that the students can work their way through it. It's a very flexible program, and it's not uncommon that students are doing it year after year or semester after semester. We have had students doing it for 5 semesters. And I feel I always learn something every semester, although we have been doing it 4 times a year since 1997. And I think David would agree with me on that. A very important part of this program is to respect the Hawaiian concept of kuleana, which means responsibility, but it also means right. And we are concerned about that, not only for students, but also for faculty and community. And I probably should have put in institutions, administrators here as well. These are, you can see, these are some of the things that we are working towards. This work with Malama Inaupua became part of a bigger thing as we started working more closely with a national initiative called Center Science Education for New Civic Engagements and Responsibilities. I should also mention that the Malama Inaupua program in early on in the 2000s, one of the student leaders that were working for me, who is now married to a senator in Hawaii, he became a senator a lot because of her, I would say. But she actually submitted our program to a competition that they had at Manoa about sustainable programs. And we got this really nice recognition back saying, this is a nice program. You're doing really great work. We have that on a plaque, but this is not really sustainability. That has changed. In some ways, the model that we have with this program has become something that is running through a lot of sustainability programs. We could say for a service learning program, it has become a poster child for teaching sustainability across curricula. With the National Center, and Center stands for Science Education for New Civic Engagements and Responsibilities, through working with Native Hawaiians in particular, the very, very strong culture and recognition of both research and practice. We developed a kind of a new brand in the center organization that was not really paying attention to indigenous knowledge. And we have been working really hard since then to expand this perspective. I personally think that we can't solve the issues that we are facing today without learning from the people that have been at the places for many, many years. So I really appreciate the land acknowledgements that we had early on. This is military practice. Sorry about the noise. I'm in Kaneo here on the windward side of the island of Oahu. So this kind of work actually meant that we were awarded the first ever award in exemplary collaboration from the center community, and also that we became the first center model state. In the previous picture, there was a picture from Washington, D.C., where some of the center leaders received this award. Our strength in Hawaii, aside from the very strong network building on indigenous practices and indigenous scholars and many, many community partners, is also that we run annual professional development institutes. And then they eventually led into a system. We applied in the national context for a grant with the Keck Foundation. It's a private foundation, which makes some things in life easier. Yeah, it does. And we got the grant. The next slide gives you some more details about it. But we wanted to address the grand challenges that we are living with, and we wanted to provide contextualized and relevant curriculum and pedagogy to promote native and non-native students better success and higher education. Hawaii was the main model. We took that model designation very seriously and reached out to University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and Ila Sigvak, Humboldt State, Channel Islands, Northern Arizona University, and Salish Kootenai College. And some of these have become very strong partners that we are now developing grants where we have an includes planning grant where we are building this work out. So this KIC grant was called Transcending Barriers to Success. And it was focused on connecting indigenous and Western knowledge systems to tackle grand challenges. Now, the whole framing of this has been a true learning experience. What do we call it? Do we call it sciences? Do we call it traditional science, disciplinary science, indigenous science, and indigenous wisdom? We have had many very fruitful discussions about this. But our main focus in the TBS work was to advance these 4 strategies. 1, make indigenous and Western knowledge system connections for a redesigned curriculum. And could I say institutional change. Tackle grand challenges such as ecological and biocultural restoration. Support STEM success for Native American, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islander students. These are the federal terms, of course. And then build our authentic, durable campus community partnerships so we could continue to have this positive impact working with Native students. So here in Hawaii, we have been running institutes or gatherings since 2017. We have smaller ones until then, but from 2017, we developed rather large annual events that the University of Hawaii Assessment Office considered this a really innovative way of doing faculty development. We can, if you want, we can talk about later how we do it. But the first institute was focusing on connecting indigenous and Western knowledge systems around the concept of water. It was a pretty classic institute, and so was the next. We kind of had the Western presentation and the indigenous presentations, and then we gave the faculty and community leader presence time to develop projects together around that and curriculum. The following year, we were doing better on strengthening the indigenous perspective. It was kind of, it became the title of the whole enterprise, and the focus were broader, integrating indigenous knowledge. But not until 2019, where we had strong indigenous scholars lead the institute, did we actually practice this other way, this Native Hawaiian way of learning. And we had strong work in the community as part of the actual gathering. And we would no longer call it an institute, we would call it a gathering to strengthen, to stress this different way of approaching things. You all know what happened in 2020. So our plan for 2020 moved down to 2021. And instead we did an exploratory grand challenges event where we tried to gather in a virtual world. And that actually worked surprisingly well. We were blessed to have a dean, the Dean of Social Sciences, is that what it's called? Napoleon, from Kapiolani Community College.
Dean of Arts and Sciences.
Arts and Sciences, sorry. Actually bless the little space we have on a virtual campus in this virtual world where we all met as avatars and interacted as avatars. Imagine that. But we are trying to keep a strong focus of indigenizing that particular way of interaction. Next year, oh, sorry, this is already now. In less than 2 months, we are gonna have our last grand challenges, and we are gonna stick to our original goal of cultivating food and health, of that very strong link. Since we settled on this theme, health has becoming an all-encompassing concern for us all. We realized that we probably will have to go 100% virtual. We did not think that 6 months ago, but it looks like it. And if any of you are interested in participating, you're really welcome. Just get in touch with us and let us know. So while we've been doing all this work, Native scholars in Hawaii have really developed a whole array of literature about indigenous scholarship and solving issues in our world. And our last slide has several of those articles and books that they have published. So if you're interested, take a look at that. The University of Hawaii system has adopted a sustainability policy. And that actually happened at our 3rd annual Institute of Sustainability in Higher Education. So the University of Hawaii system is dedicated to supporting sustainability as much as institutional policy will let the leaders in that program do it. I will now transition to Denise, who's been such a support in all this program making so that we have been talking about, and also are leading programs in the Waikiki long-term programs. We are going to fast forward and talk about the more recent projects. Take it away, Denise.
Thanks, Ula. My colleagues are being modest. If we really talked about all the work that they've been doing over the last 30 plus years, it would be a 3 or 4 hour seminar, honestly. But I want to talk about the willingness to listen and learn from each other, from our partners about their needs, and having the respect for all the different ways of knowing. And what I've done, I've been here since 2015 at Kapiolani Community College, and what I've learned here is that we need to listen to one another to be able to be effective and give our students an opportunity to really go out in the community at large here and really make a difference and really provide some of the needs that are there. With minimal resources, I have to say, our students have just done a wonderful job in connecting with their own community. A lot of our students live in the Waikiki area, where we're doing most of our work right now with our Waikiki Community Center. And we've been developing a, like it says here on the screen, a multi-year hazard mitigation plan in relation to pandemics and natural disasters. And basically what it boiled down to is we provided disaster preparedness training for over 500 senior citizens in the Waikiki area in the last 2.5 years. And we were able to do that with the support of many of our partners. Next screen, please. We created a consortium of organizations that included, of course, higher education institutions and many nonprofit organizations and for-profit companies. For example, the Hawaii Management Company that owns the building that some of the seniors live at, they were able to give us a $7,000 startup grant so we could purchase these bags and the items that go in the bags. And we were able to provide 360 disaster preparedness kits, and we've actually given out all of them. The premise was that the seniors had to come to the Waikiki Community Center and go through a training and fill out a survey and give us feedback, and then they would be able to get one of these kits. It's like your to-go bag. And what we taught them was how to shelter in place and be safe there and not have to worry about going hungry or getting medication and things like that if they're properly set up ahead of time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, well, like I said, this is the kit that they received once they did the training. And right now we're about 515 individuals that were trained in the Waikiki area. Now you have to understand, Waikiki is a flood zone, and if a big tsunami or some kind of natural disaster involving water came through there, they might not, if they live in a high-rise building, they might not get down to the bottom floors. They may be stuck in their apartments. for several days, possibly weeks in some cases. So we want them to be prepared and be available to have, to be able to reach out and get information. And that's why we provided things like whistles and a battery operated radio. Next slide, please. And another thing that the kupuna or the elders said they wanted in their survey was they wanted their streets to be safe. And we found out through their feedback that there was a lot of dangerous sidewalks. So we worked with the city and county, and we found out that there was an app that the Age-Friendly Honolulu group had created. It's a GPS mapping app. So we were able to map spot the danger areas, and then we all came together and we discussed it. Next slide, please. And we set up these teams to go out, and the city and county provided the materials. And this lovely man, I forgot his name, but he came out, and we had students, Waikiki residents, Rotary Club members. It was a really exciting time. They got out there and they physically patched the sidewalks. Next slide, please. So, okay, different slide, but that's okay. So on top of that, our students provided information and packages in these lovely bags that were donated to us on disaster preparedness at their annual senior wellness fair that was sponsored by the Waikiki Community Center. And it's just about the willingness of everyone, you know, to learn. And, you know, like Ula was saying earlier, it's our kuleana, it's our responsibility. And we're all learning from each other. Our students are learning from the seniors. As a matter of fact, some of our students have hanai'd or adopted some of the seniors that they started working with years ago, and they're still connected today, and they still speak to one another, which is really exciting. Next slide, please. So we do a lot of outreach, and we also found out that our seniors wanted to learn how to use their cell phones and other devices. So we brought our students down, and they taught them how to attach pictures and PDFs to their email, and how to use their phone in other ways besides making phone calls. They learned how to text. They learned how to attach documents and other things like that. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. So what I wanted to say is that all of these long-term partnerships have been ongoing for so long, and our next phase is we've worked with Waikiki Community Center for so many years, and we've wanted a food pantry on our campus, and that's finally happened this year through this long-term partnership. We've worked with the Hawaii Food Bank, we work with the Waikiki Community Center, and now we have an ongoing food distribution place here on campus that's not only open to our students, but it's also open to the public. And tomorrow is our next food distribution day, and we're giving away over 100 bags of food to our students in our community. And I just wanted to end with that because the work continues every day. We're here helping our students be successful and connect to their communities and really learn how to do outreach and learn how to gather information, as opposed to just going in a community and saying, hey, we're gonna do this. We go into a community and say, hey, what do you need? And that's what we're walking away with when our students leave here. We want them to know how to connect with other people and communities in that way. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Bob now.
Thank you, Denise. Yeah, this work has, the work in Waikiki was also funded by a HUD grant, where we made a commitment in the HUD grant that we would do some sustainability and resilience and disaster preparedness work in Waikiki. So there's a part of Waikiki from Kuhio Avenue to the Alawai Canal, which is people who live there. And then the piece from Kuhio to the ocean is largely hotels and the tourist industry. So there's about 27,000 people who reside in that little strip of land, and most of it's very high rise, and the work that Denise has been doing has been really impressive. You think about a power outage and people not being able to get into elevators. So we did a workshop at the Pacific Region Risk Management Ohana Conference last March, right before COVID hit. In fact, some of the people at that meeting were not able to get back to their home islands in Samoa and Guam, and the Pacific, because those places locked down. So a lot of those people were stuck on Oahu. So we've been working with the city and county. The city and county of Honolulu got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, their 100 Resilient Cities program. You may want to Google that. It's really interesting how 100 different cities around the world are planning for resilience. The Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities program. Honolulu was the 100th city selected. And we began thinking about, so the city came out with an action plan on resilience. And this year we're going to work on two major initiatives. We're going to do the research on Action 15 in that plan, which is to develop a network of community resilience hubs. So if you wanted to Google OLA, Oahu Resilience Strategy, you'd see what Honolulu's looking to do. The other project is called the Kaimuki Middle School Microgrid Project, which is right across the street from the campus. It's a middle school, and we're supporting them in adding solar battery energy storage so that there would be energy available to first responders in East Honolulu. KCC's just finished 3,700 added 3,700 solar panels with major battery storage capacity. So we're hoping to be part of an energy backup system on the slopes of Diamond Head. Next slide, please. Tackling Action 15, there's those groups. This will be a project with the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. There's a nice, succinct definition of what a resilience hub is. It's able to function in all conditions. Usually they say blue sky and then gray sky conditions. So these would be places where people normally traverse in their everyday lives within walking distance. And then they would have additional functionality in the case of a disaster. Next slide. So tonight I'm doing a workshop with Neighborhood Board 5. And we're going to be presenting these two projects to them and learn and listen to them about how we can proceed. The idea is there would be one primary resilience center in each of these 8 districts on the island of Oahu. So we're going to try to figure out what the best locations are for the resilience hubs in those districts, and then what the costs would be to make them fully resilient and available to folks, blue sky or gray sky. So that sort of completes our presentation. And I'll turn it over to Atina.
Thank you, Bob. Just for a little bit of context as we begin to close down our session, we wanted to let you know that the University of Hawaii is a system of institutions. We have 7 community colleges and 3 4-year institutions, and we're scattered over all of the different islands in our state. And so in order to collaborate with one another, we oftentimes have to use airplanes. And we discussed this during our session. No, you can't take a boat, but you must go with plane. And it has been very important to our work that we continue to support all of the institutions, the public and the private, to do the partnership work in our communities. We're very proud of the efforts of the Hawaii Pacific Islands Campus Compact. In 1994, our state became the 10th compact to be established. And for many years, we had all of the institutions, both public and private, in our state as members of our compact. And we expanded out to the Pacific Islands. We have the U.S. territories of American Samoa, Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands. Their higher ed institutions are also part of the efforts that we support to provide them with opportunities to partner not only like with us in Hawaii, but also with each other, and to join in programs that we have. One of the programs that Bob had mentioned was that at Palolo Community Center, they had 2 vistas that started a long time ago and are now still employed at the Palolo Community Center. Those vistas came through a project from Hawaii Pacific Islands Campus Compact. Hawaii Pacific Islands Campus Compact also historically has tried to break down some barriers with the federal grants. We were the first to request from the AmeriCorps Vista organization to allow us to have vistas in the U.S. territories that I mentioned, in American Samoa, Guam, and Saipan. They had never been asked that question before, and so we gave them something to think about, and we received permission to be able to allow our programs to expand to their institutions, and I think that they are richer for it, and have made a difference through their association with the institutions in Hawaii and with the Hawaii Pacific Islands Campus Compact. I am very proud to be a colleague with these folks that presented today. And just to give you a little bit of personal background, Bob, Denise, and Ula have been working with me for almost 30 years. Denise was a student of mine, and then worked in my office, and then has moved on to make tremendous contributions to our community through her positions. And we are a family. We are at the University of Hawaii system family, and we are a family of, very close colleagues. So it is a pleasure to work with them. And I want to just allow a little bit of time. We have a few minutes. If we can go on to the next slide, Ula, to ask you, because our session was about amplifying our community voices, we want to take the opportunity to amplify your voice as well and hear from you. We'll have a little bit of time with JR's help to have you ask us some questions in the chat, but also if you would just reflect a little bit, because no service learning session is complete without some time to do a little bit of a reflection. Think about what are some ways that you might be able to amplify the diverse ways of knowing of your community partners and of your students? And how can we humble ourselves and our own academic ways of knowing to allow for those voices to come through? And if you can, please take a moment to imagine or identify existing partnerships that can provide a foundation for the biocultural restoration, the environmental justice, the community resilience, and the climate change. If you would like to ask us some questions, we have just a few moments that JR can facilitate for us and our panelists. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
There is one question that has come in. Could you give more information about the 2021 Grand Challenge on food and health?
Ula, you're muted again. You want me to answer? Yeah. Yeah, I think you see our emails there. We do invite people from all over the country to become part of this. It's really focused on food and health this year, and the connections between those topics. It will be virtual. It will be free, I believe, right, Ula? You want to describe some more?
Okay, I unmuted myself. I figured it out. Yeah, it is free. It's free. And the participants that work hard also earn stipends. You have to be from Hawaii to do that. Higher education faculty or community leaders. I just wanted to show you the literature at the end, and then I'm going to back up. This PowerPoint is going to be available so you can check it out more. it's a 3-day thing. We typically spend some time framing, and we spend some time learning pedagogies and other resources. We always have an expert in sustainability across the curriculum, another one in engagement, community engagement. Others that have developed a workshop in how you teach to big questions. But once that framing is kind of in, what we would have done, and what we're still hoping a little bit that we can do, we will go out to a specific community partner that actually has created a large area for producing food to improve health. And the unique part about it is that the leaders of that area come from a low-income health center. So it started out with health, but have become a really amazing place. And the leaders of that project are very knowledgeable and giving. So we might have to deal with them virtually, but we will integrate that. But then we take time to develop new programs, to meet each other, to network or netweave, whatever we want to call it, to create transcending programs and curricula. And we also support the implementation of that going forward. So those that are willing to go all the way and develop stuff, implement it either at their community site or in their teaching in higher education, they earn a fellowship for participating. But it's a very amazing event. It's fun, it's transcending, it's inspiring. Even if you have the administrative task to deal with, it's enjoyable. Yeah.
How do we get more information on that, Willa?
Email me.
Okay.
Email Ula at hawaii.edu. Yeah, I should say,
There's nothing
that,
posted right now on that, on the March 5th through 7th yet?
What is that, sorry?
Is there anything posted for the March 5th through 7th grand challenges?
Next week we are gonna open a website or some kind of social media about it.
Okay.
yeah, we're working on a very large NSF grant today, tomorrow, and for the first part of next week, but it should be up in the middle of the end of next week. I should say that we use the term course redesign. Basically, it's not the kind of changes that you have to go through the curriculum committee for. It's, you want to redesign this course to integrate indigenous knowledge and some sort of active pedagogy, Aina-based pedagogy. So there's quite a bit of interest. I think we had over 140 people last year. So.
I'd like to also take the time to invite everyone to a virtual event that the Western region of Campus Compact is putting together in March. On March 17th, our continuums of service will become virtual, and we'll have a 3.5-hour event on similar topics. Our information will be made available next week. And we'll go live and we'll go out to everyone so that they can register in our Western Region conference event. And I know that JR and his colleagues are working on a Midwest conference as well, which will take place in May. So just wanted to mention those activities and that you should look at your Campus Compact emails coming out soon for further information on those things.
There is not a question, but a resource that was shared in the Q&A. So Scott Lorson says, through Pacific Island Climate Adaptation Science Center, we have directly engaged diverse knowledge forms in building up existing long-term networks through collaborative research and adaptation to climate change impacts. The program name is the Mander Climate Core. Here's the website, which has a 28 publication on the homepage covering the development of this program. He shared the web link. Please email me if you have any questions at slarson@hawaii.edu. Hola. And I cannot actually copy that over. So Scott, if you're still on, if you wouldn't mind copying that text and pasting it in the chat, and then that way everyone can have access to the direct web link and your email address.
Yeah, I think in the months ahead, we're probably going to see things like a climate core or resilience core coming out of the Biden administration. And so we're fortunate that we have Atina and Denise and that they really understand all of the bureaucratic paperwork that has to go in to support those things. But we found those vistas very, very helpful. They cover a lot of work, a lot of capacity building for us that faculty just don't have to do. So I would keep an eye out. I would even go so far as to send an email to one of your congressional representatives and say you're interested in whether there's going to be a climate core or a resilience core, and maybe put a little pre-pressure on them as the Biden administration tries to find a way for people to do meaningful work. It's not going to just all be about economy and investment. There's lots of work that young people can be doing around AmeriCorps kinds of work. And so we want that to happen and we want it to be really effective. So let's all see if we can get that going.
Denise was able to copy over and paste Scott's comment and resource in the chat. So that is there if folks want to look at it and need it. I also did add right above that in the chat, the 100 Resilient Cities link from the Rockefeller Foundation. So folks should be able to find that.
Yeah, I meant to say that if you want to see how Palolo Homes represents the work that's happened there, you can just Google Palolo Homes and you'll see how they really speak to the work that's been done there from their perspective. So Palolo Homes is a Googleable. I've learned how to say that. No, I haven't. Anyway, so Palolo Homes, check it out.
Perfect. Any other last minute questions from our participants or any last statements or thoughts from our panelists? Well, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Honoring Ways of Knowing for Biocultural Restoration and Resilience in the Face of Climate Change, which was brought to you by Atina Pasqua, Dr. Robert Franco, Denise Pearson, Dr. Ula Hassiger, and David Chang. To find out more information about Campus Compact, visit compact.org. That's where you can find all National Campus Compact programs and resources, including upcoming webinars that will happen throughout the spring semester and the archived webinars that have happened this past fall. Thank you all again, and we'll see you soon.
Aloha.